Hey everyone, this is Ted the Tailor. I wanted to do a bit of an informal video this week. I think I'm going to do a few of these and actually split this up into multiple short videos to go over what I use, the tools I use, the types of tools I use, and kind of answer some of the questions I seem to get on my Instagram account that I can then just show you here, and you can have a nice database of information. Now, everything in this video will be personal towards me. These are the tools I use, these are what are important to me, and this is how I use them. So I think that disclaimer is really important, and let me show you my collection and we can go from there. Now, before I start, I really want to let everyone know you do not need all of these tools all at once to start a project. You just need a few basics. I would say your basics would be a dressmaking shear, a paper shear, some needles, thread, and then a thimble. And I think that's really all you'll need. That's what you really need to get started and actually start stitching fabric. I can go into the little things in another video that are a little bit more important. Invest in those, and those will be your best friend when you're working. So I think the best place to start is to tackle So I would say the best place to start is to tackle the great needle debate. I've heard a lot of back and forth about what's the best needle to use and the only needle that people use, and I am not a firm believer in any hard, fast rule. I think the most important thing is the needle that you are comfortable using, that goes through the fabric easily, and that you can get your thread through. Those are your three basic needs for a needle. So just make sure that as long as your needle meets those basic requirements, don't worry about your needle so much. Now, these are my two favorite brands. So I have John James. He's a little bit more expensive than the Lance. They are a finer needle, not size-wise, but quality-wise. They go through a better finishing process. So if you're working on something extremely delicate or expensive, or something that you really want to cherish and not have too many problems with, I would use a John James. They are finished a little bit better. They go through a better finishing process, which means that they're tumbled and then they're hand finished, to make sure that they don't have any burrs or dull edges, dull points. So what I use, the sizes that I use, I generally have a variety pack that I have. Then I usually use a size 8 for most of my needlework. So hand stitching, sometimes, if I have to do a little bit of needlework like embroidery, but only if I'm only using a couple threads, because these holes are very tiny. But these go through silks really nice, fine linens, etc. As for everything else, I sort of use a range, and I just sort of pick based on what the fabric's needs are. As you can see from here, this is a nice selection. John James holes tend to be a little bit smaller than Lance's, so it makes threading them a little bit more difficult. But like I said, with that extra hand finishing, you're getting a nicer thread through, and it's not quite that difficult. Now, I had a teacher once that actually yelled at me for waxing the thread before I thread the needle, because she says you clog the holes. I don't know if anybody else has heard that, but I went years, decades even, without waxing the thread before I threaded the needle. And then I learned that was completely wrong. It's actually really easy to get the needle through the hole if your thread is pre-waxed. So I make a point to do this, and that really helps get the thread through and saves you a lot of headache. And if you need to clean out the hole, a small silk pin or a dressmaker's pin will clean out the hole just fine, even a little bit of hot soapy water. Just make sure you dry them so they don't rust. So those are the John James. Now, the other brand I use is Lance. Lance is a cheaper brand. They're from India. I don't find the quality to be much worse than the John James. So I save my John James for when I'm doing something really delicate that's not going to destroy the needle. If I'm working on something like a pair of stays where I'm working really hard with my hands or pliers or etc., I use Lance. Lance are cheaper. If you break one, which I do a lot when working on stays, if you break one, it's fine. You're not going to cry over it. So that's my role as to how I decide between the two. Now, the Lances, I usually keep the John James in the packages so that way I know where they are. They come in these really nice packages where I can stick the needle back into it very easily. They just sort of, I think these are on open packages. Yeah, they are. But if you notice, you can just sort of peel back that, and then this opens, and then it closes really nicely with that little flap. So these sort of work as their own little container. Maybe one day I'll get a really nice container for them, but for now, no. What I do use for my Lance needles is I found these at a flea market. They are old needle holders. At least I believe they are old needle holders. I can't see what else they would be. If anybody knows, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to know. But I've seen them used for needles mostly, so I keep my Lances in here. So they get a little jumbled up. And I'm not always 100% sure what size I'm using, so that's where my intuition comes into play. And you'll get used to that and figuring things out based on, you know, your thread, your fabric, etc. Oh, now I've made a mess. I try and always make sure that I keep the points down, because your fingers will thank you for not stabbing them every time you reach in here. So let me just double check. Yeah. Okay. So we'll put those back. So I have two of these that I use. One is for my embroidery needles. One is for my sewing needles. This is the sewing needle. So anyway, Lances are really good. I have them in a variety of sizes. They get thicker as you go down, so they work like wire gauging. So this is a 6 sharp. So that's a sharp is their medium sort of width. This is an average width. This is what I use for most of my sewing lengthwise. I'm sorry, not width, length. This is an average length. I try and keep them in their packages so I know what I need to rebuy. Sorry, these aren't sharps. These are crewels. Crewels are the medium length. That is an average length. That is the length I mostly like to work with. So you'll see I have them in a 6, an 8, and a 9. And then you have what are called betweens, which are even smaller. So let's say I'm working on so these are size 8, so you're gonna notice that they're much finer. This is a brand new package, which I love opening because they're so well packaged. Makes me feel like I'm working in like an old tailoring shop when I open these packages. So you'll notice it's much finer, but betweens are much shorter. They're very, very short. So what I use this for is really rare, but if I have to do sewing with really short, tiny, itty bitty little stitches, I will use a between. Rarely use them. That's why I only have them in one size, because they are quite a little pain. So just closing this package. Anyway, so those are your betweens. The next size up is the crewel, which I just showed you. So that'll be the between size of this. That's what I mostly use. I hate closing these packages, but anyway. We're starting with the betweens. Those are the shortest that you can buy. Do it for really, really small hand sewing. I wouldn't buy betweens in any other size other than an 8. You might be able to get away with a 9 if you're really, really talented at threading a needle, or use a size 7. But you want to keep it within that size range because you're working with very, very fine thread, which I will go over threads in another video. They are over there. but betweens are sort of my favorite for very fine sewing. Then we have the crewels. I just showed you the length on those, so those are a little bit longer. And then you have sharps. So let's talk about sharps. So sharps are a little bit longer than your crewel stitch. Sorry, your crewel needle. There is a crewel stitch that is for embroidery. As you can see, very, very fine. Let's see if I can get that to focus. Very fine little holes. So this is a pain in the butt to thread, but it's really nice for your silks and your lightweight linens. So I do a lot of sewing with my size 8 crewels. Sometimes I'll use a sharp if it's a slightly heavier fabric and I need a longer needle to get through, but it's a loosely woven fabric. So things like tweeds or wools that I would lose the crewel inside, I would use a sharp. Then my next length is darners. Now this is if I'm working with like a very loose, you can see how big that is. I believe this is used for darning. I don't darn, so I don't know. I would assume so, considering they're called darners. Bigger hole means easier threading. I'm assuming that's for yarn, but I'll use this on a thicker coat fabric. You can see this one's thicker, much thicker than your 8s. I wish I had an example of a 7 crewel and sharp, but I do not, so you can sort of see the difference, but I think you saw it in the 6. But anyway, this is for heavy fabrics, and I use a relatively, not thick yarn, but a nice size yarn in here, something you would probably use in your machine for, let's say, top stitching or something like that. Then I have my 9s. My 9s are if I have a tighter woven fabric where the 8 crewels are not fitting into, I will move up to a 9. But like I said, it's trial and error. So you just sort of have to work with the fabric a little bit. If it's giving you trouble, go up or down based on the trouble it's giving you. So that is needles. I could talk about these tapestry needles really quick. So what do I do with tapestry needles? Tapestry needles I use for lacing my stays. I know Burnley and Trowbridge sell a bodkin. I have yet to be able to make a hole big enough to get that, not the bodkin. I forgot what they call it. Anyway, it's that little white needle piece. I have yet to be able to get that through my holes. I just make my hole small because I like a more delicate look, but I use these to lace up my stays. So that is needles. All right, everyone. So let me know if you have any questions about needles, and I'll see you guys in the next video where I will discuss threads.